Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late this morning. I'm not sure what happened. Forgot where I was, I think. How are we all? Good? Good, good. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Good morning. How many times can I say good morning? Hi. How is everybody? Thank Crunchy, it's Friday. Feels like it's been a really long week. I'm glad it's getting to the end of it. It'll soon be 1 o'clock. So have you all had a good week? Any juicy stories that you want to share with me? No? Probably don't. No. Okay. Right, I've got quite a few stories to talk about this morning. Obviously, we didn't have a news report yesterday. I was away delivering training on the Renters' Rights Act to a letting agency yesterday. Really good session. Really enjoyed it. Very interactive team, which is always really good. Nice to see an agency that already has the knowledge but just want to sort of, just improve a little bit and just understand where they're going to be moving forward, how their business is going to look, that sort of thing. So that's always good. So let's dive into the news headlines. And obviously, those of you that saw my video yesterday, I can't not start without talking about former Housing Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick. So I'm going to start with the story in GB News. I did actually watch the press conference yesterday, GB News, of Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick. So Robert Jenrick was unceremoniously sacked from the Conservative Party yesterday by the leader, Kemi Badenoch, after information was brought to her that he was plotting something behind her back. She sacked him, which basically meant that he was in a position where he couldn't just defect to reform. He was then basically unemployed and couldn't cross the floor, as they call it. So Nigel Farage had to make the decision of whether to accept Jenrick or not. He did make that decision, and Jenrick has come across and is now a member of Reform. Now, Robert Jenrick was the Housing Secretary of State between 2019 and 2021. He was actually one of the more proactive housing ministers that we have had. He actually famously wrote an open letter to all council heads of department saying that you cannot keep telling tenants to stay put until the bailiffs turn up when a Section 21 is issued. He wrote that open letter. It's still available. It was a very good letter. Sadly, the councils didn't really listen, and it's still a practice that goes on today. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat today. So it was interesting to watch the press conference. Robert Jenrick, when you've watched his political career, seems to be somebody who maybe isn't the most trustworthy. So we'll have to see how that pans out with regards to Reform. My concern really is whether Reform now have so many Tories in Reform that it is kind of watered down and it is no longer the Reform Party. It is now the Conservative Party, 2.0. Will the mentalities of the Tories come across to Reform? Will it kind of almost bite the hand that feeds it? Be interesting to see. Our local former MP here, Nadine Dorrit, she was former Conservative, very loyal to Boris Johnson. She was our MP here in Shefford. She's also now Reform. So a lot of Conservatives have gone across. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks. Will Reform just simply be the new Conservatives? So moving on to an article that caught my eye in Property Reporter. This is Battersea Power Station partnership delivers social rent homes. Now, this is a partnership between Battersea Power Station site and Winkworth Sherwood, who are a social housing builder. So this is the homes will provide 200 council-owned homes at social rent levels for local families. The homes represent a new phase of the 42-acre Battersea Power Station development, which already combines residential, commercial and cultural use. The social rent properties will occupy an undeveloped plot east of the Grade 2 listed former power station, forming part of the Phase 5 of the master plan. It's actually called a master plan. Heads of terms have already been signed, etc. They were back in November last year. But what I thought was interesting was, if you wanted to live in London these days, if you and I wanted to rent in London, how much would that cost us? And realistically, what is the difference between the Battersea Power Station social homes social rent and what you would be paying if you wanted to live in that development or around that area as a private rented sector tenant? So I did have a bit of a look, and if you look at Zoopla, just as an idea, if you look for Battersea, London, the average weekly rent is around the 500 mark. It kind of dips between sort of 460 a week, another property 675 a week, another property 507 a week. So it dips around the £500 a week mark. Now, social rents in Wandsworth you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. 148.86. 148.86. That's pretty much £400 less than what you would pay on the private market. Now, this kind of grips my shit a little bit. Now, I am not against social housing. There is a time and a place for social housing when people are in need, and I think it should be a stepping stone. I don't think it should be a lifestyle choice. I have been in a situation where I didn't have a job and I was receiving universal credit. I was still private renting at the time. But if there had been a need for me to have to move out of that private rented and into social housing, I would have done it. But it should be a stopgap. It should be a safety net. It should be a stepping stone. It shouldn't be a lifestyle choice. Now, I've got to be honest. If I'm going to pay £400 a week less to live in a social housing new build property on this deluxe master plan, Battersea Power Station site next to this beautiful, iconic Grade 2 listed building, do you know what I'd be doing? That would be a lifestyle choice. Absolutely, 100% a lifestyle choice. £148 a week compared to nearly £500 a week. Come on. I mean, there's something that's not quite right in my mind there. Social housing shouldn't be a luxury in that way. Housing should be a luxury, absolutely. Everybody deserves housing, absolutely. We all deserve a roof over their head. I'm not saying that at all. But a brand new build in this luxurious development, £148 a week compared to private rented sector of nearly £500 a week or more, just seemed a little crazy to me. That's kind of what we were looking at, and I was just like, that can't be right. That can't be right. I'm going to kick my job in and I'm going to make an application to Wandsworth Council. I think that's the way forward. What do you think about that? Do you think that 200 new social homes, I mean, it's great that they're building it, don't get me wrong, we need it. But what's your opinion on them being social rent level and it being £400 a week cheaper than renting in the private sector? What's your opinion on that? I'd really like to hear your views, because I'm certainly in two minds whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you. So now I'm going to move on to a report in Property Industry Eye. And this is estate agents turn to AI amid rising compliance pressure. So the article goes on to say, estate agents across the UK are increasingly turning to artificial intelligence as workloads grow and regulatory demands intensify, according to research from Alto. So Alto is a software system that a lot of agents use. It's like a CRM system, so it keeps all their client data on there and stuff like that. So the Alto 2026 Agency Trends Report found that 52% of estate and letting agents plan to adopt AI tools for listing, lead generation and marketing within the next 12 months. A further 66% expect to rely on compliance and anti-money laundering automation to keep pace with regulation. Now, I'm all for systemising and automation where required, but I think we need to be careful that we're not overly reliant on AI. I am certainly aware that a lot of people use ChatGPT, Copilot and Google for their legal references, especially for the Renters' Rights Act. And unfortunately, those platforms are a little bit behind the times. They're extracting the information from everywhere, not just necessarily the legislation itself. They're looking at some of the amendments that were proposed but rejected. So a lot of times it's wrong. You have to also be super clear what question you're asking, because it can't think outside the box. So if you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. And also, if you word a question in the way to get the answer that you want, you're going to get the answer that you want. But I think from this perspective, looking at getting a system in place to support staff, I don't know whether workloads are growing. I mean, when I was in agency many, many years ago, before the war, swing a lantern and all that, we basically had the bare bones of a computer system, a spreadsheet, a Rolodex on my desk and a telephone. I mean, our workload was big. All the paperwork, we had to do that ourselves. There was no systems to do that for us. So realistically, are we just getting lazy? Are we now in a society where everything is just so instant that we've actually forgotten how to do our jobs? I don't know. I think using AI and systems is a great idea. It helps you keep on top of everything, and I can see why agencies would want to do this. But I don't know whether complete reliance on AI would be a good idea. So Ricardo Dawson, CEO of Alto, said AI isn't the future of a state agency, it's already here. That sounds like a line in a movie. Agents are drowning in compliance checks. Are you drowning in compliance checks? Data entry and repetitive tasks. So that's part of the job. And that pressure is driving burnout. What's changed is that AI is no longer just a chatbot or reporting tool. It's starting to decide what needs attention, help agents complete tasks faster, and quietly coordinate the 100 of steps involved in getting a deal over the line. AI is finally taking weight off their shoulders by automating the dull work, flagging risks early, and keeping deals moving without constant firefighting. Now, I don't know if I really agree with that, because ultimately, if you are a letting agent and you are in charge of a deal, then you just do your job. That's your job. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like you've got one job. So I don't know, are we drowning in compliance? I mean, okay, let's look at this realistically. There's 169 acts and 402 regulations that govern the private rented sector. And with the Renters' Rights Act coming in May, that will be 170 acts. But we don't need to know all of them intimately, and most of them interlock, and then there's some case law and this, that and the other. If you're doing the basics, if you're doing the 101 of lettings, and you're being open and honest with everybody, it's going to be quite difficult to get it wrong. It's only if you're trying to find workarounds and loopholes and, you know, dirty back handshakes and all that, that's when it's all going to start getting a little bit Pete Tong. So what are your thoughts on that? I have actually seen a couple of questions I'm going to go back and try and find relating to that. Laura, I'm a lettings director. Please advise where the best place to find the correct legislation. That's a really, really good question, Laura. Unfortunately, there isn't one go-to place. So for me personally, obviously, I'm going to promote my own product here. I have the Lettings Advice Service. We provide advice on everything from day-to-day lettings to problems with tenants to bigger legal issues. We have on the website lots of guides, templates, documents, all the things that we think you will need. And we are completely up to speed with the compliance. I lived, breathed, ate and slept with the Renters' Rights Act as it was going through Parliament. But there are other places that you can get really good insights, but some of them cost. So obviously Property Mark, Arla, that's a really good source of information. They are up to date, but of course you do have to be a member with those to get that information. You can attend webinars and seminars. Most people are advertising them on a regular basis. So people like David Smith, housing solicitor, Ryan Heavens, housing solicitor, they're always really good sources of information. They're very black and white and also non-jargony, which is nice, because ultimately you don't want to have something where you're so overwhelmed with legal speak, you're like, what did he just say? So they break it down into English. Where else is a good source? Nearly Legal blog, which is run by Giles Peaker of Anthony Gold Solicitors, is another really good source. He talks more about case law, so you can sort of see how the legislation is working, what judges are doing and what their opinions are, and just industry publications, to be honest with you. And it depends how geeky you want to be, I suppose, Laura. I actually do sit down with a bill and I go through it with my highlighter pens and my post-it notes. I'm sad like that. But, you know, that's my job. It's my job to be on top of the legislation. And I think if you are a lettings director, you're kind of in that position. It's your job to know, but also it's your job to make sure your staff know. So I suppose realistically, maybe investing in staff training is vital, is important, because you want to know that the people on the ground, on the front line, are as up to speed as they can be. I worked with a letting agent many years ago, and what we set up was internal experts. So, for example, there were 3 property managers, there was a girl in accounts doing the rents, and there was someone that did the maintenance coordination. So each of them took their favourite bit of the job and became an expert in it. So the girl in accounts, obviously, rent arrears was her thing. She loved it. So she researched more on that and became the office expert. She then wrote articles about it that were put on the company website. She did little videos, again, that were uploaded. And this showed her expertise and her knowledge. But once a month, each of the experts would do a sort of 10-15 minute presentation to the office, to their colleagues, because you want to also have trust in your colleagues and understand what the other person does. A lot of the time we're in our own little bubble and we don't know what Jane does. We don't know what Stephen does over there. So something like that, having your own internal experts passionate about their little element of the job, can actually make the office run better, because they're not then picking each other up on mistakes. They're going, oh, did you realise that? Oh, no, ask Jane, she knows her stuff. So sometimes the internal training is sometimes better than the external, but you've obviously got to make sure that what they're teaching themselves is correct. So just making sure you're pointing them in the right direction for the initial training. I hope that I went off on a tangent there, Laura. I do apologise. So many different information being sent and contradict themselves. I absolutely agree with that. I see that all the time. Funnily enough, that happened to me yesterday. I had an email from a very well-known training provider. I won't name them here. And their email basically explained that the new ground 1A, which is the landlord wanting to sell, could not be used by a limited company. I was like, that's not right. Ground 1, which is landlord or landlord's family member wanting to move back in, that cannot be used by a limited company, because a limited company can't move into a property, nor can it have family. It's an inanimate object. It doesn't really exist. So ground 1 is off the table 100%, but ground 1A to sell wasn't off the table. And I did actually speak to someone at this training provider and said, did you mean to print that? And they just said they'd go back and have a look. But yeah, so you're absolutely right. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. Again, no, we are not drowning. It's my job and I hate AI. I don't use it. On Alto, they use AI for property write-up. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's one of those things, Laura. It's personal choice, isn't it? I agree with you. It's your job. You just get on with it. I mean, you don't see mechanics suddenly standing there going, oh, I'll just get the robot to do it. Don't need to do it. gas engineers aren't suddenly going to go, oh no, I'll get AI to do the gas check, because it's just not going to be physically possible. We aren't in property. We're not in the property industry. We are in the customer service industry. We just happen to have properties as our commodity. That's all it is. People buy, people let from people. If you walked into a letting agent as a tenant and the letting agent looked you up and down and was like, you'd be straight out that door and go next door, wouldn't you? Because you want a human interaction. And I think we're losing that. But I'm also seeing the opposite. A lot of agents like you aren't embracing AI and are doing exactly that, making it a more personal experience, which I think we lost for a while. Let me just see, did I miss any other? Yeah, I like the personal approach too. I think landlords that are selling are accidental landlords, are not doing things right. I don't like the term accidental landlord, and I'll tell you why. Because when you do something by accident, it's because you had no knowledge, that you didn't purposely drive your car into another car. It was an accident. It wasn't an on purpose. Nobody drunkenly purchased their property on Amazon, woke up and went, oh shit, I'm a landlord. It's not an accident. It's an on purpose. What they are is unprepared. It's unprepared landlords. But anyway, that's just me being pernickety. But I think those exiting the market now are the smaller landlords, 1 or 2 properties. They've been self-managing and they've been doing it like that for the last 30 years. And then they don't like the new legislation. It's going to be too much like hard work. So they're just selling. But I think they would have exited in the next 5 years anyway. I don't think this is suddenly newer landlords going, oh, no, I'm not doing this. But what I am also seeing, and I don't know if you guys are, is I'm seeing a much younger landlord come into the environment. I used to run a networking event in St Albans. I ran it for 15 years. We had about 100 attendees a month. And I was seeing the attendees get younger and younger and younger and younger. And when I was talking to them, these are people that normally would have been first-time buyers, but living with mum and dad, their first purchase is actually a buy-to-let property. They're doing that as an investment. That's their strategy. They're still living at home with mum and dad, but they're actually becoming landlords on purpose. That's their investment strategy. And I think that's clever. I mean, I wish I'd have done that rather than just get married and move out and think I knew it all. But anyway, where was I? Thank you, Laura. You've got me off on my soapbox there. Thank you very much. So let's move on to Letting Agent Today. And this headline is Fraud. Raids and arrests in probe about property rental company. Dun, dun, dun. So the article goes on to say, the Serious Fraud Office has staged raids and made arrests in a major probe into alleged fraud and bribery. The suspected offences have estimated value of over 300 million. SFO Investigations, that's the Serious Fraud Office, carried out searches and made arrests at homes in Altrincham, Maidenhead and London, and commercial site in Manchester. Even the Italian Garda were involved in carrying out searches in Venice. The company involved is Home REIT, and REIT is spelt R-E-I-T, listed on the London Stock Exchange. It sold investment in its leasing of thousands of homes across the UK, raising more than 850 million in its first 3 years of trading. Investors were told money would be used to buy and restore properties that would be block let to publicly funded charities and community interest companies. This was to house rough sleepers, veterans and people struggling with eviction. Returns would be generated to the investors by the rental payments. In November 2022, an investor report into Home REIT raised multiple concerns about the company. These included the valuation of its properties and the ability of its tenants to pay rent. It suspended trading on the London Stock Exchange in 2023, and the Serious Fraud Office spokesman said the company had the metric rise, spending millions on properties supposed to house the most vulnerable in society and provide return for investors. Its chaotic downfall has left many with unanswered questions. Today we conducted a major operation in advance of our inquiries into suspected bribery and fraud. I mean, that's awful, isn't it? A business that was set up with the frontage, so to speak, to help vulnerable people in society. The people that need the housing isn't there. We know we don't have enough housing. And then investors ethically investing, thinking they are helping society. They're going to get a return. Obviously, that's why anybody invests. You invest to make money. But ethical investing is something that's becoming bigger and bigger. And I think this is just quite heartbreaking, really. So obviously, the people at the top, the directors and the CEOs, I'm sure they're walking away with a lovely pay packet. Thank you very much. Hopefully the Serious Fraud Office can investigate this more deeply, and Proceeds of Crime Act and things like that. Hopefully they get all of that taken away. I don't know how Italy would deal with it. I'm not sure how Italy deal with things like that, their judicial system. But hopefully people get their money back, because otherwise this is just an awful project. Maybe somebody might even take it over and carry on the good work rather than the fraud and bribery work. But what an awful story. What an awful story. So my next news report is from LandlordZone. And this headline is, New National Group Promises to be the Voice of United Landlords. Now, I did have to have a little chuckle, not at any of this, but at their logo. Their logo is almost identical to the PRS, the Property Redress Scheme. And I thought that was quite funny. Because I thought that was quite funny because, I don't know, is it like trademarked or something? Are they trying to look, was it an on purpose? Was it purely an accident? It did make me chuckle. What I might do when I put this on YouTube, because all of these morning lives go onto YouTube. So from that perspective, you can go back and read them again. And I put the logo of all the news reports that I've gone as well. So yeah, I just went on to read this. And so this is a new organisation has been set up to unify local and regional landlord associations around the country. The Voice of the Landlords Association, VOLA, aims to ensure that landlords are actively represented in policy discussions, legislative reforms and public debates, and to provide a forum for exchange of knowledge and ideas. The not-for-profit organisation is the brainchild of Paul Cunningham, chair of the Eastern Landlords Association. He hopes other groups will join VOLA, which also includes the British Landlords Association, Leeds Property Association and Devon Landlords Association. Together, they have around 53,000 members. Now, the NRLA, obviously, is a landlord association. They have around 110,000 members, I believe. Cunningham believes that the issue of selective licensing schemes has prompted many landlords to question why they aren't being represented on a national level. The ELA is currently challenging Great Yarmouth Council to defend its upcoming scheme and has threatened legal action. VOLA is also looking to work with government to help develop secondary legislation under the Renters' Rights Act to address the struggling court system. So VOLA chair Charlie Baker, who is the ELA director, says more small associations have 200 to 300 members and are struggling to keep informed. He says, while the NRLA works directly with landlords, VOLA is working with associations. We want to provide an alternative so that the NRLA is talking to government where we will have members alongside them with the OLA. Membership is open to any landlord association that meets the criteria. Now, I have heard there's been a lot of noise that maybe the NRLA aren't as proactive for landlords as they could be. And I think maybe that has a lot to do with how they're marketing that. I know Ben Beadle personally. He's on the Zoopla advisory board with me, and I've known Ben for a very, very long time. I'm also a freelance trainer for the NRLA, so I'm very aware of the work that goes on behind the scenes. And I know how much passion and effort and evidence Ben put into Parliament when the Renters' Rights Bill was going through all of its committee stages. The problem was it didn't matter how he presented that information, whether he turned up in a, in a clown outfit or naked, I don't think anybody would have taken any notice because they weren't interested. They had their focus. This is what the Renters' Rights Act is going to look like. We're not interested. Ultimately, the House of Lords put forward over 300 amendments and only 3 of them were adopted and taken forward. So they weren't even listening to their peers. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Maybe the NRLA need to shout a little bit louder about what they're actually doing and how they're doing it across more platforms. I don't know. I'm not their marketing people. Obviously, they've got their own agenda, absolutely. But it can't hurt to have more voices in that arena, surely, because ultimately the more voices landlords have, the more influence they will have on government, hopefully, if government is open to listening. And then I'm going to finally move on to something that I found on Rightmove. Now, I don't normally look on Rightmove for news. It hasn't really occurred to me, but this popped up. And Rightmove have a section of funny property stories. I was like, oh, like this. And these are like little snippets of what people have submitted of like going through their daily life. And this little one caught my eye, which I thought was hilarious. It's only a short one, so I'm going to read it. And this comes from Lorraine. 2 years ago, I had my university year abroad in Murcia in Spain. I looked at many flats and ended up settling on one that was on the main shopping street called Gran Via. That's my best Spanish accent, by the way. Having spent a week in the flat, I noticed that the doorbell kept ringing. I mentioned it to my housemate and she told me that there was nothing to worry about. It was the gay brothel next door. My Spanish was not great at that point, so I thought that I'd maybe misunderstood. But she had proof. The website called Tropical Chicos. Of course, I went on, and the next day I ended up in the lift with the transvestite that was on the website. I was in absolute shock. After living in the flat for 6 months, the brothel moved. But those first 6 months were certainly an entertaining experience. I loved that story. That really made me chuckle. And I think what I'm going to do is pick one of these funny stories every day to read out to you to close the live with you. So again, thank you so much for joining me the last couple of weeks. Today, I will see you again Monday morning, 9 a.m. And again, like I say, if you do please follow. It helps my algorithms. Not that I really know what they do, but it helps get my message across to more people. The more information out there that people can get, the better. And those little diamondy things and those gifty things, that makes TikTok happy. I still haven't actually sat down and worked out what they do, but if you can send those, that would be super great too. So thank you again for everybody for joining me. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you 9 o'clock Monday morning. Have a great weekend, guys.